Good morning. It's a joy and a pleasure to be worshiping with you this morning. I thank Reverend Aaron and others here for inviting me, and I certainly appreciated that wonderful prayer just delivered a promise that we shall all be released. I've enjoyed my 3 days here, part of this conference, where we're discussing the subject of the church of the future. And when I spoke the other night, I kind of ended my talk with the point that church should be a verb and not a noun. So I'd like to kind of pick up on that this morning, talk about two verbs that the people of God ought to be about today. One verb is a verb of wanting. That's a phrase from Julian of Norwich, a wonderful 14th century mystic, one of the founders really of the English language. She talks about wanting, making things one. It's a lot like the word unity. And I think that wanting is a way of talking about mysticism, because mysticism is about our deep experiences of union and communion with the sacred, with the divine. And this gives birth to everything else in our lives. Here's where transformation takes place in our hearts. Here's where the release is tasted in our experiences of wanting. Another way to talk about mysticism, again using Julian's words, she says, between God and the human, there is no between. I kind of like that. That's wanting. That's mysticism. If you've had that experience, I'll bet, number one, you weren't looking at your watch. You were in another place and time. And secondly, you don't easily forget it. Between God and the human, there is no between. Father B. Griffith, a wonderful Benedictine monk who lived over 50 years working in India, in an ashram there for Hindus and Christians, says that for all the effort our species has been putting into searching outer space and sending people and robots into outer space, he said the real action has to take place in our search for inner space. And the search for inner space will make our search for outer space, he says, child's play. That there is so much depth, wisdom, darkness, beauty, undiscovered territories in the depths of our souls and our hearts. This is the journey we have to make as a species at this time, because time is running out. The great Václav Havel, who died this year, the president of Czechoslovakia, and part of the revolution, the Velvet Revolution that brought about democracy there, he said this to the American Congress a few years ago. He said, the salvation of the human world lies nowhere else than in the human heart. Without a global revolution in the sphere of human consciousness, nothing will change for the better. And that's what the mystics are about. And that's what the mystic and everyone in this room is about, to expand our consciousness. Meister Eckhart, the great 14th century mystic, says, God is delighted to watch your soul enlarge. Notice, we're here to grow a soul, not just to sit on one and cash it in at the end of our life. Now, the second verb that church needs to be, besides wanting and mysticism, is prophecy. Being prophets, turning out prophets, nurturing prophets. Now, what is a prophet? Rabbi Abram Heschel has written a classic book on the prophets. And of course, it's his tradition that came forward with the experience of the prophets. He says the primary work of the prophet is to interfere. Oh, so there we have it. Interfering is the second role of church, the second verb to name what being church really is. So that's what church is. It's the place, it's the space, it's the happening where mystics and prophets are birthed and nurtured, championed, supported, and challenged. This is all, then, about our expansion of consciousness. I had a dream a few years ago that had a very clear sentence in it that I think is what the Native American call a big dream. By that I mean it applies to a lot of people, to all of us. The dream said this: there is nothing wrong with the human species today except one thing, that you have forgotten the sense of the sacred. That's what the dream said. There's nothing wrong with us today except one thing: we have forgotten the sense of the sacred. So it seems to me that what we want to interfere with today is the loss of the memory of the sense of the sacred. And I'd like to zero in lightly onto three areas, what I call the 3 E's, where we need to bring a sense of the sacred back, and to bring it back swiftly, because in fact time is running out for our species on this planet as we know it. The first of these areas is education. Education is a funnel through which we pass so many of our adults, young adults, and we have to ask whether we couldn't be doing a lot better. The Dalai Lama says education is in crisis the world over. I find that very comforting. That it's not just a Kansas problem or a California problem where I live or an American problem. It's a species problem. Our species is being challenged to wake up because education has fallen into soullessness. 72% of black boys in America are dropping out of high school. They're not dropping out because they're dumb. They're dropping out because they're bored. And the very definition, the working definition of education in our country, that's what's dumb. There's a school in Palo Alto, California, a high school. It's a very privileged community. It's where Stanford University is. In the last 2 years, there have been 7 suicides by high school students there, and many more attempts that didn't succeed, if you will. Kids jumping in front of the commuter train. And what did the school do about this? They got parents to volunteer to walk the railroad tracks, trying to convince kids not to jump the train today. They haven't asked, why do high school kids want to kill themselves? What I found when I did my research on this is that in fact this high school is defined by one thing, and that is, what Ivy League college are you going to get into? Which is an absurd value, and of course it's not coming from the kids, it's coming from the adults. And the school has done nothing to get to the core of the issue. E.F. Schumacher says the essence of education is values. Well, that's what's missing in a lot of education. And therefore, passion is living. And I think I know the solution is about creativity. Because kids today have so much wisdom inside of them and so much beauty. It is about drawing this beauty out, drawing this wisdom out, and then the kids won't be bored. I know it, because I've been working with inner city teenagers for several years using this as a methodology. And they turn from wanting to drop out of school to wanting to stay in school because the joy of learning is in creativity. Another E that we have to address and interfere with is economics. It's pretty clear, I'm sure everyone in this room has been unemployed lately or knows someone who's been unemployed. We know people who have lost their house. We know people who are way over their mortgage rate with their house. Economics it's so important that it needs public debate. It needs to be interfered with by those who care about the sacred values of keeping families together and keeping Main Street employed. David Korten, K-O-R-T-N, is one of the prophets of our time, I think, in this subject. Written several books in which he's imagining and really designing what a healthy economics could be. An economics that works for everyone in the world, not only all the human beings, but all the other beings as well. Because economics must be reintegrated with ecology and with the rest of nature. And this is what he says. This is what he says about economics today. He says, the failure can be traced directly to an elitist economic ideology. A 30-year experiment with trickle-down economics has favored the interests of Wall Street speculators over the hardworking people and businesses of Main Street, and it has been proven that it does not work. He says, we have no more time or resources to devote to fixing a system based on false values. You see, here's a human being who's willing to bring value and a sense of the sacred into economics. These false values represent a discredited ideology, he says. We must now come together to create the institutions of a new economy based on a values-based pragmatism that recognizes a very simple truth. If the world is to work for any of us, it must work for all of us. In this Easter season, we should be thinking and talking and debating about the resurrection of economics that is for all of us. Because resurrection is for all. Resurrection is not for an elite. And he goes on then in his work to explain just how to bring this about. But essentially, he says, it's like a healthy ecosystem. A healthy 21st century economy must have strong local roots and maximize the beneficial capture, storage, sharing, and the use of local energy to achieve community by community, community by community, all across the nation, the unleashing of creative energies of our people, our governments, businesses, and civic organizations. He says instead of basing economics on gross national product, which essentially measures the rate at which money is flowing around and sloshing around, he says we should build our economics on the indicators of what we really want, the health and well-being of our children, families, communities, and the natural environment. That is the basis of healthy economics. A third E, where we have to interfere today and be prophets, is, of course, in the area of the environment, in the area of ecology. The earth is suffering so deeply at this time. More species are going extinct at this time than at any time in the last 65 million years. The last time there was anything like this spasm of extinction was when the dinosaurs disappeared 65 million years ago, and at the same time many other species also were brought down. Only this time around it is human presence on the planet that is the primary reason for this collapse of the earth. For example, this past year the United Nations came out with a study, and it said that if we continue to fish the oceans in the way we're doing it with these great big monster fishing boats, many of them subsidized by governments, if we continue this, in 40 years there'll be no fish in the oceans. Now, how many wake-up calls do we need? We're being asked to interfere. A week ago, I was in Findhorn, Scotland, and I was giving a talk the next day, on Monday, on the cosmic Christ. And I had a dream, because I just read this article about the ocean and the fishes, and 40 years from now. And the dream was really interesting. It was a dream of, there was a party. Human beings were having a party out on a lawn. And then I noticed that there was the swimming pool was filled with fish of all kinds, really big fish and medium-sized fish. And they were all like crowding into the swimming pool, crowding in. And they were gasping for air because there wasn't enough water. You see all this drought that's happening around the world and in our own country. And I was trying to shout to the people partying that there is something serious going on here. And then I realized that the first name for Christ among the early Christians was fish, ichthos. They wrote this word, ichthos, fish, in Greek, on the catacombs in the first century in the church. And ichthos not only means fish, but it stands for Jesus Christ, Son of God. So I realized the cosmic Christ is the fish being crucified. The cosmic Christ is the forests being crucified today. The cosmic Christ is the polar bears, the tigers, the elephants, these great beasts, these great beautiful beasts that are literally disappearing before our eyes. So for me, this is a real wake-up call. That even the Christ, these fish in this pool in the dream, were like coming up for air. Even the Christ is begging us to intervene, to interfere, to do things differently. And we are fully capable of that as a species. The same United Nations study that said if we continue the way we are, there'll be no more fish, also pointed out that if we change our ways, if we cut back on these giant monster fishing boats and so forth, the ocean is capable of repleting itself and filling itself again. So here we have then a new story of the death and resurrection of the cosmic Christ. And it needs to happen through human consciousness. It's we humans who have to be resurrected, to wake up, to get out of denial. Meister Eckhart says, God is the denial of denial. It's a wonderful phrase. When we get out of denial, God flows again. And so we have to open our eyes to the crisis in education, to the crisis in economics, to the crisis in the environment, in order that the Spirit of God can truly flow again and reignite the intelligence and the imagination and the hard work that we humans are capable of, that our ancestors all engaged in, and if they had not, we would not be here today to be praising the Creator as we are. So let me close with a very interesting story. It's a true story. It happened in my neck of the woods in the Bay Area a few years ago. There was a whale out beyond the Golden Gate Bridge that had got all entangled in fishermen ropes. And was thrashing around, and in the process was dooming itself because it got more tightly bound in the ropes. And the Coast Guard was called, but actually it was ordinary men who were called, and they got in a small boat, 5 of them, each with a big machete in their hand, and went out to try to liberate this whale. That was a very dangerous operation. One swing of the whale's tail and they would have been done for. But they had the courage to do it, and they spread out around the whale. One of them was right at the whale's eye, and it took about 45 minutes or an hour for the operation to proceed. There they were cutting the ropes of the whale. And they were successful. They released the whale just before the whale otherwise would have drowned in the water. And what did the whale do? First, the whale swam 3 times in a circle, a very big circle. Obviously delighted, as any one of us would be, to be released from such bondage. Then the whale went up to each one of the 5 men and nudged each one gently. Said thank you to each of the men. And the men have been interviewed since, and each one of them said it was the most transcendent experience of their life, that their lives were changed. And especially the one who was eye to eye with the whale for 45 minutes said he was just in another world. I think that story is so powerful for so many reasons. It shows how deeply our kinship is with the other species on this planet. They want to befriend us, and they expect we want to befriend them, not just use them and use them up. That's one of the lessons. But another lesson is that we're all in bondages of some kind. We're all in prisons of some kind. That's what denial protects. Denial protects us in our cozy little boxes. And that's why Eckhart says to cut through denial, to take those machetes and cut through the ropes of denial, is to release the divine once again. God can flow. And do not think that liberated whale was not the cosmic Christ in a most magnificent disguise. So let us be mystics and prophets, people of wanting and people of interfering. In this way, church will find whole new rebirth in our time, just in time. Thank you.
Are we blessed to be here today? I know that I speak for myself, and I believe that I speak on behalf of the collective of us here, that we are so in appreciation for the path you have lived, for the courage you've had in your life, for all of the things that people know and don't know about you, about the path that you've lived, and that you have created a demonstration that is absolute light and continuously blessing in so many ways. We say something in unity, and we say it very often, but I think it is more relevant than I've ever experienced it right now in this moment in the words of unity when we say, we love you, because you are absolute. That we bless you, and we acknowledge that you have been blessed, and we behold the cosmic consciousness as you. Thank you. Your courage and your life is making a difference, has made a difference, and continues to make a difference. So with that in mind, with that note.